Good morning. I'm Scott Umlauf. I use he, his pronouns, and I'm proud to serve on the worship arts team. Picture the scene. A well-dressed crowd is nervously gathered on a brisk March afternoon facing a well-armed police force. They are there to protest a government that has denied them, their family and friends, their rights and their dignity. They know the leader of the armed forces has publicly and rudely encouraged them to attack the protesters, even if they are completely peaceful. The protesters pray together and step out on their route. They are immediately and viciously attacked, leading to many serious injuries and forcing them to abandon their march. Am I describing an event that we may see in the near future? Maybe, but let us pray not. In this case, I was thinking of the first march from Selma, Alabama, March 7th, 1965. As you know, the events of Bloody Sunday were not the end of the story. The Reverend James Reeb, a Unitarian minister from Boston, previously an assistant minister at All Souls in D.C., was one of many horrified by the coverage of the event that rushed to Selma to witness and support the next steps. In the evening, after dinner, Reeb was assaulted by local anti-civil rights thugs. Although he was white, he could not be treated in local hospital due to his association with the civil rights movement. He suffered a long ambulance ride to Birmingham, where he lay for days in a coma and eventually perished. On March 25th, protesters, reinforced by prominent civil rights leaders, lined up again at the ramp of the Edmund Pettus Bridge and set out again for Montgomery. The question I pose today is, who did they trust, the marchers and Reverend Reeb, to witness their courage and sacrifice and demand change in an unjust society? Evolutionary scientists and anthropologists believe that we, as social primates, evolved to live in tribes of hunter-gatherers whose existence depended on sharing work and the spoils of hunting. In other words, they developed trust in people they knew and interacted with on a daily basis. Of course, as game theory predicts, there's a risk of cheaters or freeloaders in such a system, so a default stance of reciprocal altruism was balanced with ways to detect and punish those that proved untrustworthy. As we shifted to agriculture in larger groups, the system of trusting only those you frequently interact with became impractical, and humans began outsourcing trust to institutions such as religion, business, and government. These institutions created norms and rules of behavior to serve the same purpose. Fast forward to today, one can view the intervening millennia as variations on a theme of trust expanding in ever-widening circles of geography and culture. Albeit this has not always been a positive trajectory, as institutions of technologically dominant culture promoted the systematic exploitation of other societies. But by and large, I would argue, as would scholars like Robert Wright and Steven Pinker, there's been an advance in trust in institutional rules to expand the benefits of cooperation to larger and larger numbers of people. But today, we acutely feel the limits of the trust we have placed in one of our most important institutions, as ultimately the norms and rules can be manipulated and abused by a small number of powerful people to the detriment of the general population. This hurts deeply, particularly for those whose core values lean strongly into trust in our institutions and our fellow people, and only seek to punish cheaters as a last resort. We're left spinning in Yeats's gyre. It feels that the center cannot hold. Let's go back to Selma. The marchers on March 7th had an implicit trust, clearly not in the state government of Alabama, its governor, or its police force. Deep in their hearts, they trusted that a majority of the American public would see the rightness of their cause and would use their democratic power to force change in institutions. By the way they showed up, dressed in their best clothes, radiating faith, trained and committed to nonviolent protest no matter how savagely they were beaten, they were sending a message. We are trustworthy. Even when others demonstrate they cannot be trusted, we can be trusted to bring peace. In these days of deep challenges to our faith, we seek for signs that we can still trust our fellow Americans, the officials who resign rather than carry out illegal orders, the judges who refuse to be pressured into signing off on acts that will target our most vulnerable family and friends, the crowds who turn out to support those unfairly terminated or challenge their representatives to do their jobs. While we search for those who we can trust, we can also send a signal to our community, the country, and the world that we are trustworthy, that we uphold our values, that even as the hate from certain quarters reaches a fever pitch, we will keep love at the center. To quote Jimi Hendrix, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace.
I'm Brian Sullivan. I use he, him pronouns. And the last time I gave a reflection here was on the Sunday before the election. I stood here and told you that American Unitarianism began with the rejection of the doctrine of original sin, the idea that humanity is weak and depraved. I said that our default adaptive strategy is to be kind and cooperative. A few things have happened since then. Do I still think I can trust that people are good? Since that day, my niece had several terrible seizures during her first semester as an undergrad and had to withdraw. The doctors at school and at home thought it was all in her head, until finally last month she was diagnosed and treated for 3 different tick-borne diseases picked up while a camp counselor this summer. Now she's in treatment. She's 5 weeks seizure-free and improving. She's going to be okay. But that all-in-your-head diagnosis took a toll on her new college friendships. My niece doesn't want to go back to what was once her dream school. Can you trust that people are good? Since that day, a masked gunman planned a brazen murder and shot a husband and father in the back in broad daylight in Midtown Manhattan because that man led a health insurance company. My social media lit up with friends who were gleeful about it, thought the gunman was a hero. Can you trust that people are good? Since that day, a clutch of the world's most maladjusted billionaires has been wrecking our 249-year-old republic, committing acts of outrageous cruelty across the world, and also upending the security and careers of my friends who do important, worthy things. They seem to think it's funny. Can you trust that people are good? Well, yes. Yes, you can, just not all the people and not all the time. That Sunday, I quoted the Reverend William Ellery Channing. This is what he said in 1818. I am a living member of the great family of all souls, and I cannot improve or suffer myself without diffusing good or evil around me through an ever-enlarging sphere. I think they spoke more floridly then. So breaking it down into more modern language, we're all in this together. We can only get better or worse with each other's help. And the more we strive towards those aims, the larger our impact. At All Souls Church, named for that very thought, in Washington 130 years later, the pastor, the Reverend A. Powell Davies, fought segregation and McCarthyism. He put his take on Channing this way: the years of all of us are short, our lives precarious. Our days and nights go hurrying on, and there is scarcely time to do the little we might, yet we find time for bitterness, for petty treason and evasion. What can we do to stretch our hearts enough to lose their littleness? We can be our best selves, and that takes some help from others. There are people so broken they can't be better. And I think the president and his circle have those pathologies. That's a fight way above my level. I don't know how to fix them. But I do know that we need to stretch some hearts around us so that this doesn't happen again. There are plenty of good people who find themselves in a bad time and do not rise to that occasion because they don't meet the right help. We're in this together and we need each other to keep love at the center. Now, I'm professionally a web developer, but for reasons of affinity, necessity, pandemic, the fact that both of our families are dealing with the same rare disease, a few years ago, my friend Steve invited me to stop working from home and run my company from his unused paralegal desk. Working around a law office, you can't help but learn about people at their worst. I've heard and seen the awful, vicious things that people do with knives and cell phone cameras and guns and stolen passwords and cars. Not surprisingly, victims who've been badly hurt will lash out with revenge fantasies and violent thoughts. And time again, I have heard how my colleagues answer that. Keep talking that way and you'll deserve to lose in court. I bet if I went to your house, I could find a picture of you dressed in funny clothes, telling your friends and family very different things about your ex. Stop. Stop. Don't speak until I ask you a question. I don't want to hear that nonsense from you. Stop. That's Steve. And my favorite. Right now, you're not behaving like the person Mr. Rogers knew you could be. David Grover. Thank you, David. It works on all but the sociopaths. People will pay hundreds of dollars an hour to be spoken to as though they're small children. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you to infantilize the people you disagree with. There's plenty of that going on in Washington. But why have so many of my office mates developed the strategy to call their clients back to their best selves? It works because nearly all people are already good. Their highest aspiration is to love and to be worthy of love, and you can remind them of that. Most people do know when they're being mean or sexist or racist or cruel, and they do not like having the mirror shown to them at that moment. Love is already at the center, and if it's there, you can find the path to justice, transformation, equity, generosity, all our UU values, no matter how overgrown and narrow it might have become. Good people at a bad time still want to be good. And if you care for and respect them, you can help them do that. I trust that that is true. Forgiveness is something we do to keep love at the center. The first Native American poet laureate of the United States, Joy Harjo, tells us this: all acts of kindness are lights in the war for justice. All acts of kindness are lights in the war for justice. Say it with me if you believe it. All acts of kindness are lights in the war for justice. Well, ain't that some rockets red glare? We're at war with a lot of terrible injustices right now. And to win, we need to call each other to be our best, most moral, good selves. Here in this community, between us and out among the people we love and care about, in an ever-enlarging sphere. You can tell them it's in the Bible. Psalm 141 says, if a righteous person reproves me, it is a kindness. If they rebuke me, it is as anointing my head with oil. We are going to keep ourselves from lashing out in pettiness and bitterness. We're going to call our sweet land of liberty back to its sweetness. We're going to stretch our hearts and remind people how decent they can be. They brought this war to us thinking that liberals are weak. Well, we're going to burst some bombs of kindness in air. They could not be more wrong. We have love at the center. We are made of the only stuff that can win. The way out is up. I trust in you. I trust in that. Amen. As you wish. This is the way. I love you.
Trust. It's a scary word right now, when so many of the institutions we've come to rely on are under attack, when our very livelihoods are under attack. To be honest with you, when the team met to discuss our reflections for this service, we were scared. Scared to come off as hopeless, but also on the flip side, scared of painting over people's pain with false positivity. I'll be honest with you, I am struggling with being a UU right now. I know love should be at the center, but how do you love the seemingly unlovable? How do you love people who don't play by the rules? I was thinking about this, and after a while, I started thinking about my father. My father is very much on the opposing side of the political spectrum from me. I thought, how do I manage to love him despite our differences? Before I get into this, I want to put a disclaimer. My decision to work with my father is my decision. You have to decide how to handle the people in your life and your relationships and what you have the bandwidth for. If you don't have the spoons or the ability, that is okay. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about the evolution of my father. When I was 12, I overheard my father telling my mother that all gay people should move to an island and kill each other off with AIDS. I've heard him use slurs. I've seen him scream and throw things when he was angry. My father was not a nice or a kind man. He wasn't even likable, much less lovable. I didn't get along with him for most of my life. He remained this way until about his 50s. Something happened in his 50s that changed him. He refound his religious past. He found God again. I know, I'm a you, and I said the G word. I'm not advocating that you find God, but my father found God. And I say refound God as some events happened in my father's life that caused him to lose sight of his faith. He didn't let go of that anger, and it seethed inside of him, festering for years. So what happened? Well, like I said, he found God, but he also realized that someone he loved was a part of the people he said he hated. I saw him go from a man who wouldn't give a dime to a relative to someone who devoted the rest of his life to helping people. He went to seminary and he became a pastor. He had a church, and for whatever reason, attracted all the people my father had judged for years. He had a trans member come from time to time. He had people of color, people with mental health challenges, and yes, a bunch of liberals. Each Sunday, he'd shake their hands and give a sermon about God's love, and I honestly think he meant it. So what do? This man who I hated for years was someone I was beginning to appreciate as at least doing some good things. Now, will my father ever join PFLAG and support his gay daughter? Probably not. But I think when the pendulum was swung so far one way, any movement towards the middle is improvement. Any movement towards the middle is going in the right direction. Some of these people we consider to be on the other side are waking up. My father is far from enlightened. My father is far from being a fully accepting and loving person. But when you have that far to go, I think moving in the right direction is something we can at least give credit and hope for. That's not what I want. What I want is for him to see the light, to find the error in all his ways. And I think that's where the battle for us lies. We want change overnight, but the reality is change is slow, and people may never fully get to where we want them to be. But love can create improvement. Is this reflection moving away from the theme of trust? Maybe. But I think one thing we can trust is that love can create improvement. When I talk to my father on the phone, I make sure to tell him I love him before hanging up. I never thought I'd get to the point where I could use those words with him. But I see, despite all his challenges and all the ways yet to go, I see how far he's come, and I have to try to give him some credit. If he does suddenly realize maybe he's been on the wrong side of history for a while, I'm not going to be the one to say, I told you so. And that's where love being at the center comes in, I think. I think it's accepting the change. So maybe your difficult uncle that makes Thanksgiving conversations super challenging, maybe there's hope for him. People who are so far gone don't change overnight, but I trust that they can change. And as hard as it is to admit, the thing that creates change isn't logic. It isn't a well-crafted argument or even a zinger of a meme on Facebook. It's talking to them from a place of love. Because most humans know what love looks like and have a hard time being a jerk when you show it. Perhaps that's where the phrase "kill them with kindness" comes in. My partner is Korean, And I guess in Korea, they have an idiom. If someone makes an effort to step towards you, you should at least try to make an effort to step towards them. So maybe we never meet in the middle, but maybe we can get closer. Maybe we hope for small changes, some improvement. Maybe those small changes will build into big change over time. Again, I'm not advocating you stay in relationships that are harmful. My father is not really a good man, but he's a better man. And I think he's going to keep changing. And I'm going to be okay with that. So perhaps those on the other side of the political divide won't get to exactly the point we want in the time frame we want, but we can hope for better.